was a time in the Bible where there was an exceptionally great transition, Old Testament to New Testament, and one interaction marks that more than any other in my viewpoint, and that is the baptism of Jesus by John the Baptist. You know, John the Baptist, as far as Jesus was concerned, was the greatest person that had ever lived. And not only that, he's this awesome prophet. He's somebody that hears God. And so when God tells John the Baptist that the Messiah is coming, and then John the Baptist sees the Messiah, you can only imagine that from John's perspective, everything is going to change right then in a very clear way. And so Jesus actually comes to John and says, hey, I want you to baptize me. John says, I can't baptize you. You need to baptize me. And Jesus says, actually, when you baptize me, it is going to fulfill all righteousness. And so John says, great, let's do it. This is my translation of the Bible, if you haven't picked up. Go ahead and read it yourself. It's in Matthew. So John baptizes Jesus, and Jesus comes out of the water. Now, we read that the Holy Spirit descends on Jesus like a dove. The Father says, this is my beloved Son, in whom I'm well pleased. We don't actually know how many people experience that. So hopefully John the Baptist was aware of that moment. But nonetheless, when Jesus gets out of the water, the whole world doesn't just like change and everybody suddenly walks in righteousness. Everybody suddenly walks without sin. Instead, he comes back out of the water into the same world that he went into the water with. And not only that, but Jesus actually gets up and walks out into the wilderness. Not just for a couple hours or a couple days even, not even for 3 weeks, which would be a pretty long time for our loved one or friend to walk away. Like, imagine if somebody's like, hey, I'm going to change the world, and then they just disappeared for 3 weeks. We'd probably question whether we understood that correctly. Jesus goes away for 40 days. And this is a moment where John the Baptist, this Old Testament person, transitioning into what he had probably had a very clear vision or expectation about this future that was about to happen. And then that future, as it comes and it's there, doesn't look anything like he expected it to. In fact, shortly after that, John's thrown in prison. He's questioning things enough to where he sends his disciples to ask Jesus, are you the Messiah, or should we keep waiting? And of course, we know as we read through the whole story that all of this makes sense. It all plays a part in this bigger story that yes, Jesus is the Messiah. Yes, John had it right from the beginning. And John actually is beheaded in prison. So his experience of the whole situation is like not what you would expect, or probably not what he would expect. But nonetheless, it was right on target. Everything that Jesus did in that time was exactly on target. It was fulfilling prophecies, like all of these prophecies fulfilled by exactly how Jesus is living. So he's doing things very precisely, yet at the same time, it may not have been what John the Baptist was thinking it would look like. And so I use all of this as a metaphor, especially during this time of transition, where our expectations of what things will look like can be one way, but they can turn out totally different from what we thought they'd look like and still be exactly in God's will. Because a lot of times God will tell us things and we will make assumptions or interpretations about how that will play out. And those pieces of it may not be exactly right. But that doesn't mean that we didn't hear from God. And so my encouragement to myself and all of us as we're moving forward is to continue to listen to the direction of God, and at the same time not be totally thrown off or discouraged when the fruition of those directions by God don't look like what we expected them to. oftentimes we'll question whether we even heard God in the first place just because things didn't look right. But God is here, and God is speaking, and God is doing all sorts of awesome things. And I have no doubt that as we move forward, we are going to see awesome things. And those things may look different from what we have projected them to look like. But if we remain open to seeing things the way that God sees them, I think we'll actually have a value for those things nonetheless. Bless you guys.